and welcome to Targeted Impact. This is our bi-weekly expert question and answer series where we offer organisations like yours practical advice. My name's Alexandra Morgan. I am the Programmes Manager at Wild Apricot, and joining us today is Tatiana Morand, the Manager of SEO Marketing and author of the Virtual Events Research Report. Hello, Tatiana.
Hi, Ali. So nice to see you. I'm very excited to be here today.
Yes, thank you for joining us. We've got great numbers today. We've had over 900 people sign up, so I'm sure the questions will be coming in. Before we get started, let's test out with our audience the questions box. So if everyone wants to say hello, tell us where you're watching and tuning in from today, and then we can make sure everything's working technically on that side.
Great.
Hello from New Jersey. We've got Sarah joining us from New Jersey. Hello, Sarah. We've got cheers from Atlanta with James. Hello, James. Oh, people from all over: Lincoln, Nebraska, Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Hello from Chicago. Hello, Joyce in Chicago. California. Someone from New Zealand as well today. So all over the place.
That's cool.
Amazing. Everyone appears to have found the questions box. It's in here that you'll be asking your questions that I'll be sending over to Tatiana. Tatiana, why don't you give us a bit of an introduction about yourself and the Virtual Events Research Report?
Sure. So hello, everyone. I'm Tatiana. I'm in Toronto, Canada today. So it's very gray and kind of dark outside. Winter is starting early, I think. And yeah, as Ali mentioned, I am the SEO Manager at Wild Apricot. So if you've ever read our blog, you've definitely read some content that I've put together. One of the biggest things that I've worked on recently has been the Virtual Events Research Report. So we surveyed over 1,000 nonprofits, associations, clubs, and other membership organizations to see how virtual events were going for them. Some of you probably also, responded to that. So thank you. Really appreciate the chance to hear from all of you. And our goal with this report was really just to get a better sense of the landscape of virtual events for membership organizations in 2020. So many of you are doing virtual events for the first time. Obviously, this is a new thing for a lot of us. And we just wanted to put some research together to see what some of the trends were in terms of ticket pricing, fundraising, member engagement, all of the kind of questions that people had but weren't really sure how to answer. We just wanted to put together something that would really just collect all those best practices into one document so that all of you would be able to learn from it and learn from each other about how to run better virtual events.
Amazing. I have seen the report. It's fantastic. I know how much work went into it. We're all very, very grateful that you and the team put this together. So I'll ask the first question while we're waiting for our audience to ask them. Just to the audience, any questions you've got for Tatiana about the research report, about virtual events, please send them to the question box and we'll filter them through and hopefully we'll get to as many of them as possible. So to kick it off, can you tell us what your most surprising finds were when you were analysing the data for this report?
Yeah, so I think some of the stuff that surprised me the most was around some of the fundraising tactics people were using. One of the the second most popular fundraising tactic after sharing or after pricing your tickets to get donations was getting virtual sponsorships. The only reason this surprised me just because I've seen a lot of people who have questions about this and who just aren't really sure where to get started with it. So I didn't realize that it would be such a popular tactic because in my mind it was a more difficult tactic. So I would have thought people would start with something a little bit easier. But apparently it's very effective. We're preparing some content around that right now too to kind of share best practices around that, and I'm excited about that. Something else that surprised me was really just the sheer number of virtual events that are happening this year compared to last year. So initially we found that when we ran the survey, this was back in May, so these numbers are from May, but we found that 42% of organizations had already run a virtual event in May. And then another 42% were planning on doing so, they were already in the planning stages. So basically what that means is that the number of virtual events happening this year has doubled, which is crazy. It's so cool to think that people are really embracing the trend to go virtual. And I mean, obviously, there's not as many options these days if you did still want to connect with your members, but just the fact that organizations are able to do that and that they're really planning ahead and planning for that is really cool, I think.
It is really interesting that we've been put in this situation where, you know, we've kind of had no choice but to take it virtual, and people are just coming out of the woodwork here with some really interesting ideas. I'm sure you've seen plenty of them, and I'm sure you will share them with us today. The questions are pouring in already. So one of our audience members has asked, how can we support sponsors during virtual events?
Yeah, so some of the stuff that I've seen that different organizations are doing, there's a few. So you have a few different options depending on the type of event you're running. One thing that I've seen that I thought was pretty clever was getting the sponsors to send something through the mail. So like, for example, let's say you're having a virtual gala, like why not send all of your attendees like a branded wine glass, like with the sponsor, something like that. Because then you're kind of moving off the virtual world and moving into something that's, you know, a little bit more permanent, because I think sometimes there can be a concern with, you know, if it's just flashing up on a screen, like, is that really effective, like in terms of sponsorship? Something else that I've seen, if you know your sponsors are preferring to stay online, is hosting little mini events like after or before your event. So maybe something that's like related to your event, but like a little bit more fun. Like a virtual event I was at recently had a mixology class that was sponsored. So attendees, you know, it wasn't just like, oh, like a sponsor is giving a talk, because then people might not want to go if it's just like a sponsored talk about, like, let's say a software platform or something. But if it's something that's like, oh, like the sponsor can give themselves a pitch, but it's also like a little bit more fun and like interactive and engaging, like a cocktail mixing class, or maybe I'm really into coffee, so I'm like, you know, a coffee making class with different kinds of beans, just like that kind of activity that people will be engaged in and want to participate in. I would also say that something else people are doing, one person said that they had kind of an always on like news channel. So they were having like different sponsors like give mini talks, and like they had like music playing in the background. And it was just kind of like they, let's say like you have different like talk tracks. You could have one that's like all sponsored, you can have one that's like about like one topic, one that's about another topic, and then that way people can pick and choose like what they want to listen to at a given time, and it stays very engaging because there's always like a lot of different things going on that people can check out.
That's definitely a way to combat Zoom fatigue. I know that's a new term that we're all using this year, and it's very, very prominent on everyone's minds. What platforms seem to be the most successful for online fundraisers in your experience?
So online, so do you mean in terms of like streaming, or in terms of like different like donation platforms to take donations?
Donation platforms, definitely, but also places to hold these fundraisers, I would say as well.
Okay. Well, I found that, I mean, the platform we're on right now, we're using GoToWebinar. As you can see, I think it's pretty successful. Like, I like the fact that, you know, you can see my face, you can see Ali's face. Like, it's a little bit more engaging than like just that, like that slideshow or like that box or something, let's say. I think also another one that I used recently was Zoom, and that was kind of fun because you could also see kind of like this, like you could see the questions coming in, you could see the chats coming in. Participants actually had a chance to engage with each other, and that was just a lot more engaging than just like, you know, it gives that sense of community rather than people just being at home in their rooms like by themselves. It's a little bit fun if you can like actually talk to other people. So I would say like just platforms that allow for that. In terms of fundraising platforms, I would say that a lot of people seem to be doing like peer-to-peer fundraisers using platforms like Facebook that are just very readily available. I know there's also platforms like Classy and Causevox, and of course, Wild Apricot also you can take donations on Wild Apricot and get recurring payments set up through there. So if you're already a Wild Apricot customer, as I'm sure many of you are, I would say that's probably the easiest option to look into as well.
That is correct. That was a nice little plug there, Tatiana. I appreciate that one. We do actually have, just to let the audience know, we had one of our experts, Sean Kozowski, did a webinar for us last month about how to fundraise through Facebook. As you mentioned, peer-to-peer, I think that would be really great for our audience to check out as well, which you can find on our website. Getting on to the next question. Should nonprofits charge for virtual events? And if they are going to, how much?
So I would say this is a question that's been on a lot of people's minds. What we found in the virtual events report was actually that a lot of organizations were choosing to make their event free or reducing the ticket price compared to how much you would have spent on an in-person event. I'm saying like that's what a lot of people are doing, but I don't necessarily think that that's like the right way to go. Because what I've heard from a lot of different organizations is that a lot of people are choosing to donate what you can in exchange for a ticket, or just asking for a donation straight out instead of charging for a ticket price. And I think that's like a really good way to look at it, because a lot of the times people know that you're fundraising, people know that you're here to raise money for your audience, like to raise money for the people that you're serving and helping. So I think if you can frame it as that, people will often be a lot more likely to give. I know for me personally, like this ties into like another fundraising idea, which is getting merchandise. But if I know that like a store is doing something to support like a nonprofit, or I can buy merchandise from a nonprofit and get the same kind of item that I'd be getting usually from like a normal store, I'm definitely more likely to go with the option that has a donation to a nonprofit and it helps support someone's cause. So I think the same can be said for virtual events. Like I think if you can position it as like, oh, like by buying a ticket to this fundraiser, you're supporting like our mission. It's a lot different than just like, oh, like just a ticket to a random virtual event. I would also say that, yeah, like I can't really quantify amounts specifically because it really does depend on the event. Like for example, like if we go back to that gala idea we mentioned, like, and then, you have sponsors sending like branded wine glasses, or you're like sending food as part of it, or, all of that, like something like that, you might want to charge a little bit more because obviously you'll want to make more ROI and be able to actually, get return for your investment. Whereas something that's just kind of, that has less like stuff that you're actually sending or that you have to pay for, you might want to charge a little bit less. So I think it really depends on like the type of event you're doing. I would also say that you can even just ask your members like, hey, like how much are you prepared to pay for this type of event? And just, or ask other organizations in your network, like, hey, I saw that you ran this event. Like, I saw that you priced it at this price. Like, did people respond to that? And just really asking people like what they feel comfortable with. Because again, everyone's audience is different. Like, your members, your donors a lot better than I would. So just reaching out to them and seeing like what they're comfortable with, I think is really the best option.
I think that's some really great advice. Definitely just being in touch with your members, because we have a lot of micro organizations with us here today, and some people may be in better situations than others. So leaving it open to the members to sort of weigh in on those things that obviously really support the cause already. So I think that's something that members will definitely be open to. In the findings, what day of the week and what time were you finding was best to hold a virtual event?
So that's actually not something that we looked into as part of the virtual events report. But I would say that that's actually something else that would probably depend on your audience. Like, for example, I work 9 to 5. I can't go as easily to a webinar that's in the middle of the day. But if it's something that I want to go to, I'll make time for it in the evening. Same thing with, like, let's say your audience is like single parents. They probably are super busy. Like, they might not have time in like the mornings when they're getting their kids ready for school, but then maybe in the evenings after the kids have gone to bed, that's when they'll have time to attend an event. So again, I think it just really like I think it also just really depends on like the type of event you're running. Like if you're holding a happy hour, you're not going to hold it at 1 p.m. unless maybe you just want to party during the day. That's fine too. But I would say probably get better reception like after work. So yeah, I would say it just really depends on your audience. Like it depends like what kind of jobs they're working, what kind of positions they're in at home, like all of that stuff. Just be like, you could even send out, what I would say is maybe just send out a survey, be like, hey, we're thinking of hosting this event. When are you available? What's the time that works best for you? And then just base your findings on that.
Yeah, that's reaching out to the members again. I think it's really good advice, just opening that communication and seeing what works for everyone, because obviously everyone's different and everyone's
exactly.
People that support nonprofits come from all walks of life. So you mentioned earlier, jumping back onto Zoom fatigue. Can you talk about how to address this? Do you have any tips on how to avoid it? Anything that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously it's definitely real for all of us. And I think that it's something that'll just continue to happen because let's be honest, at least I don't think that the pandemic will be over anytime soon. Like here in Toronto, we're seeing that cases are kind of slowly going up again. So I don't know what that'll mean over the winter. But what I do think is that people might be scared to host virtual events because they are worried about Zoom fatigue. But I think that at this point, there aren't really any other types of events that you can hold. So just, keeping that in mind, I think especially in the winter, like when we aren't able to go outside and like have those kind of outdoors events, like I wouldn't say don't worry too much about it just because it's something like it's kind of inevitable. And I think people will get used to it because they will still want to have those kind of social connections. And if you can facilitate those at your events, like they'll push through that Zoom fatigue to come see you. Although on the note of like, if you can host some kind of like outdoor, like socially distant event, or for example, one organization that's a Wild Apricot customer hosted a virtual bike race, and that was very successful for them. They were able to raise like over $2,000 for a local food drive with that bike race. And I would say just, yeah, like organizations that allow people to like get out and like go see their neighborhood. I know another organization that we work with they're like an HOA, a neighborhood organization. They did like a neighborhood tour where they asked people to put different things in their windows, or it was kind of like a scavenger hunt where you'd write down like, oh, find like a frog statue, find like a flag, and like then you write it down and you can, because it's like it's technically a virtual event because people aren't gathering, but it's just like finding different ways to kind of act in the space that we're acting right now without getting people always online all the time. So I think like if anything, like I think just kind of having that blend of like stuff that's going on outside or like stuff that people can do on their own or with their family bubble, as well as having stuff online is like a way that you can really help combat that.
How long would you recommend hosting these virtual events, these online Zoom meetings, for instance, to save people sort of getting Zoom fatigue? Is there a recommended time frame that you've come across?
So again, like I'm gonna say this a lot, but it really does depend on the type of event you're hosting. Like for example, like this kind of conversation, or like if you just have a speaker presenting, like you just have one person, I would say probably not more than an hour because like, no one wants to listen to me, no one wants to see my face for more than an hour. Like that's enough, I'm sure. But I would say if you are having an event with multiple speakers, like maybe they can all have like an hour time slot. Um, and maybe it can be like a whole day or a couple of days. What I would say is that if you are looking to host a longer event, what becomes really important is having the chance for people to engage with each other. So maybe let's say if you wanted to do a whole day virtual event, you would have like a presenter for 45 minutes, then a break for people to, go to the bathroom, go get a snack, and then have a breakout room where everyone's like, okay, cool, like here, 15 minutes, everyone who's at that talk, just jump in and discuss what you learned from that. And basically just like having those kind of opportunities for engagement with other members and like the opportunity to network and talk. I think that's what a lot of people are missing, is that really like that in-person connection. So just finding ways to facilitate that at your longer events, I think is really valuable. That was one thing that we pulled out of the survey as well, was that a lot of people are not doing like any kind of live hangout, but that the organizations who did, like that was the most successful engagement technique that they could use. So if you did want to have a long event, or if you did want to have like a more successful event, that's the one thing like we would definitely recommend, is having those opportunities for like live interaction and live engagement.
And also just jumping on the back of that, when I've been doing my research, obviously as program manager here, it's scheduling breaks. Just make sure that people have frequent breaks where they can stretch their legs, they can keep their eyes off the screen. I think that's very, very important, and people can stay focused when they know a break is coming.
Yeah,
it's very easy
for
to
sure.
do so.
Yeah. I mean, I would say also like on that note, like if you have, it's kind of like having like a meeting at work, right? Like, I love my colleagues, but if a meeting is like over an hour, I'm kind of like, yeah, okay, guys, like I'm done. And also I really need some water. Like, please just let me go get some water and some coffee. Like, so just, just thinking about like how you feel when you're at an online event and just translating that into like, okay, what would I want? Like, what's the ideal event in my mind? And then just, turning that into a reality.
Exactly. And that being said, any suggestions on different and unique online events that you've seen nonprofits doing recently?
Well, one thing that I've seen that I thought was really cool was, you guys have probably seen this too. It's like when you get a goat gets invited to your Zoom meetings. I think that's a fundraiser that like this goat organization was doing, and they have like, so I don't know, I think that would be really cute for like any kind of animal shelter, like any kind of organization that works with animals, just having like, oh, like get a kitten to come to your Zoom meeting as like a fundraiser or something like that. I think that would be fun. in terms of other events that I've seen, I think a couple of organizations that I think, like, one thing that I thought was really cute was like online, well, it wasn't really online, but it was like curbside pickup with like a high tea. So the organization like prepared like boxes with like tea sets and like, all the stuff that you would need, like all the food, and so that way they were supporting like local bakeries too. And then they kind of got people to come pick it up, and then they could do that in their own home. So it was just like an opportunity to support the organization, but also like do something kind of fun, like with their partners and like the people that they already live with. So yeah, so I'd say those are kind of two things that I saw recently that I thought were pretty cool. So I don't know if Ali, if you have any other kind of examples that you've come across.
The things that I've been seeing aren't as exciting now as you mentioning animals, because the animal idea sounds very, very sweet. But I've been seeing people taking part in fun runs individually, and then tracking them online. And a friend of mine actually has been fundraising for some charities back in the UK, and she has been doing fun runs with her organisations, and they've been drawing pictures with the route that they've been taken, because there's a lot of apps
Oh,
now
that's
where you
cool.
can track the route that you've been taken, so you can spell out words, you can draw pictures, and those have been getting quite a lot of traction on social media, which obviously
Cool.
will then get hopefully more memberships and things. So I think that's a really cool sort of unique idea that I've seen. So let's have a look for another question. We have Nancy Settle Murphy with us today. Hello, Nancy. She's one of our experts that's actually doing a webinar for us on Tuesday. So thank you for joining us. And she's asked, what methods of engagement seem to work best to keep participants paying attention and focused? We did touch on this when talking about Zoom fatigue, but I think people are very hungry for some examples. Do we have any more to offer?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, having breakout rooms is really important. So just having that chance for people to connect in person, to chat, that helps them stay engaged because they want to be able to participate and not just be like, oh, yeah, sorry, I wasn't listening. Something else that we found both in the survey and that I found in my virtual events as well is doing polls throughout the event. So when I did a presentation recently, I surveyed the audience. I'd be like, oh, so I'm going to talk about virtual event fundraising, but before we get into that, I want to know which tactics you've used. And just having a poll pop up, people respond, and then people kind of responded in the chat as well, being like, oh, that's an idea I hadn't thought of, or like, oh, I used this one and it was super successful. And then everyone in the chat was like engaging about the poll. And I think because people were like, oh, like, I'm curious, like, I said this, what did other people say? How many other people said the same thing as me? That actually worked really well in my event. And that's something else that we saw in actually the virtual event survey, is that hosting a survey or polls during the event was actually like the second most successful tactic after having breakout rooms or like in-person hangouts, which sounds really weird. I was like, really? Like, why is it that successful? But then when I did it in my presentation, I was like, oh, like I can see why. It's because you get that immediate feedback and that immediate response. So that was super helpful. That's actually something else that you can do if you're using Wild Apricot, is like send out polls to people within your platform. So that's pretty cool. Something else that I would say to keep people engaged is just making sure that you're giving people the chance to ask questions. So this doesn't necessarily have to be like a live discussion, but even just in this kind of format, like allowing people to write in questions, help kind of direct the presentation or direct whatever you're hosting, like their own way, and making sure that they have a chance to feel heard, I think is like something that's very important to do in virtual events, especially.
At what point can you nurture free event participants to sign up for a paid membership? This is a really interesting question. If you are hosting a
Yeah.
free event,
Mm-hmm.
Sean Kozowski, I'll just sort of jump in on this one first, mentioned a nonprofit that he works with was hosting a free fundraiser on Facebook. And they basically were just trying to get everyone to go, saying you don't need to donate, no donations required, just trying to get everybody to turn up for free. And by doing that, and by sort of emphasizing that nothing was expected, they got way more signups than they ever predicted. And then when you've got people in the room and in the fundraiser, people are more inclined to donate, as per sort of this experiment that they ran. I don't know necessarily about a paid membership. I don't know if you can jump in on this, Tatiana. When's a good time to get them to do that CTA?
Yeah. So what I would say is that something that I think would probably be the most successful is just having like the first event of a series be free, and then after that asking people to pay for membership if they want to access the rest. And I think that could be really successful because people like, let's say we're doing a webinar series on social media. It's like, oh, like here's the intro level. Like this intro level course is free, but if you want to get my like really good in-depth strategies, you have to subscribe and you have to pay. And I think doing that is a good thing to do just because then people know that you're providing value. So it's not like, it's like, oh, like I did this event and it was really good. So now I feel comfortable paying for it because I've had that experience and I know how well it went. Like something for me personally is like I follow this one SEO blogger and I'm like, oh, his blog is like so useful. So then I saw that he was releasing a paid membership course and I signed up for it and I paid for it because I was like, oh, I trust this guy's stuff. I can see that his website is doing really well. I've used his advice. So if I pay for it, I'm sure that I'll get even better advice. So I think just providing like that proof point is like, you know, really important when it comes to having a CTA. In terms of like, yeah, so I think in terms of like when in the event, I would say like, yeah, probably near the end, being like, hey, like if you found this content valuable, sign up for a paid membership to get more. And just, I think really pitching the benefits that people get for signing up for a membership versus just attending for free. Like maybe let's say, yeah, like let's say like maybe they just get the first event of the series for free and then they have to sign up. Or like maybe like, oh, if you sign up, you don't get any ads. You know, that's kind of a classic example. Or, oh, if you sign up, you get access to our member database and you can connect with other members, and you know we have a forum where you can talk and you can learn from other people, or like you get one-on-one time with our coaches, like kind of making sure that you're really pitching those benefits so that people know why they should sign up instead of just always attending for free. So yeah, that's my advice on that.
So we've got some more questions coming in here which are a little bit more technical, but I'm sure you know the answers to them.
Okay.
What tools would you recommend using to poll attendees?
So most webinar platforms will actually have it within the platform. So if you are planning on doing it live, I know that the presentation I mentioned, I was doing it in Zoom, and you can just, yeah, like you just set up the poll very easily in Zoom. I know that we've actually, we don't usually do that during Targeted Impact, but I know previous presenters have done that in our like usual webinars. So I know that GoToWebinar, you can do that as well. So I would say, you know, make it easy for yourself. If you do want to do that in a presentation, then just make sure that the platform you're using has that capability beforehand.
Yeah, and you right in saying GoToWebinar has it really easy to set up. Zoom has it as well. I do know there's some external platforms where you can sort of add them in, but I think just for ease, the polls that are built in work really, really great.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. Like don't use more tech if you don't have to.
Exactly. No need to overcomplicate when you can just simplify and make it easy for everyone. One of our audience members has asked, if we record a webinar, can we post the recording on our website?
Yeah, for sure. I think that if you record a webinar, there's a lot of different things you can do with it to distribute that content. So for example, one thing that we do is that, I don't know if you guys have seen, but we have the targeted impact recaps that come out after these sessions. So basically, like we record this webinar is being recorded. Afterwards, we're going to post it on YouTube. We do a blog post that kind of has recaps of questions or that talks about different questions. You can also, let's say your webinar, like let's say one section of it talks about one thing and then one section talks about a different thing. Like, okay, like let's say we'll go back to social media. Let's say your webinar talked about Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. You could like cut the video into 3. So you could have one that's about Facebook, one that's about LinkedIn, one that's about Twitter, and post all of those on like different platforms or do different blog posts about all of those. Basically, like the more you can repurpose a piece of content that you do, the better, because then the more people are seeing it and the more exposure it'll get. And also the more use you'll get out of it and the more use other people will get out of it. So my answer to that is yes, definitely do that.
Yes, we do that. We're definitely allowed to
Mm-hmm.
do that. This will be
Yeah.
posted on our website sort of tomorrow, very soon,
Mm-hmm.
or the start of next week, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So utilizing those resources is definitely in your favor.
Mm-hmm.
So a question here that was piggybacking off another question we answered when it comes to charging for events. This nonprofit normally has an annual gala and they're going virtual for the very first time. Typically, the in-person tickets are around 150 to 200 USD per person.
Mm-hmm.
Should we make this event free or can we still charge for it? And if so, how much?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that you definitely could still charge for it. I think going back to the idea that I was mentioning before, people know that your gala is for donations. Like people are there to donate to your organization. So I would say, like, I think this is a good opportunity to be like, hey, usually, like, even just straight out being like, hey, usually we would charge this amount. If you could donate that amount, as your ticket price, that would be great. I think this is also maybe an opportunity if you did want to charge less. I think it's an opportunity to look at the ROI that you're getting from this event. So, like, okay, so you charge $200 per person for your gala, but obviously you also have to spend on food, like the space rental, all of that. So, like, if you look at like the amount that you're actually getting per person from that, like maybe that's a good opportunity to see like, how much is your usual amount that you're getting, as your ROI, and maybe just charge that as the ticket price instead. I think if you did feel, or like even slightly less, if you felt uncomfortable or you felt like your audience like wouldn't pay that much for an online event, this could also be a good opportunity to, again, like partner with those sponsors to get them to send your attendees stuff so that it feels like more of a gala experience. Um, and also, yeah, maybe just asking people like, hey, we know you haven't had many opportunities to dress up. Dress up for our gala. Like we'll do prizes for best dressed, or like we'll highlight people who like look really fancy, like stuff like that. Like anything that you can do to make it actually feel like a high class event or like a, really fancy time for people, I think is, the more you can charge for that and the more you can really make people feel engaged and enjoy the experience.
Great advice. I think trying to make it feel as in person as possible and adding all of those
Mm-hmm.
niceties on the side definitely will support if you're
Mm-hmm.
going to charge. I have
Mm-hmm.
seen personally some events, like obviously it's nowhere near the normal ticket price of $150, but people have been asking,
Mm-hmm.
as they'd have a paid bar, asking people to
Oh, that's
donate
cool.
how much they would normally spend on drinks, for instance. So like a typical drink is maybe like $7 to $9. If you'd have two or three
Mm-hmm.
at the event, then that would be your ticket price instead. And when you phrase it like that, I
Mm-hmm.
think people feel a lot better about them buying
Mm-hmm.
that ticket because it's a lot cheaper
Yeah.
than it would be.
I mean, on that note, I wonder if people could even, yeah, like maybe you could partner with like a local business to like deliver food. It's like, oh, like your meal price like is this, and but we're getting it delivered instead of like you having it at the event. Or like, oh, we partnered with this local cocktail company that'll send you cocktail kits, and like this is how much it would cost for 3 cocktails compared to like how much it would cost at our event. So even just like putting those prices into perspective and like showing that you're also supporting like local businesses and partnering with them, or maybe you can get them to donate it too. Those are just some ideas of ways that you can just make it like a little bit different and not just people sitting at home.
And jumping on the back of that, this is a really interesting question. I'm not sure if you've seen this. I haven't encountered this yet, but this is, what do you think the success rate would be in terms of a virtual fashion show? So that's something that's obviously completely different. It's
Oh,
very new. Someone's thinking
yeah.
about doing a virtual fashion show. What would you recommend? Do you think that would have a high success rate?
I mean, I have not come across that, but I think it sounds really cool. I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, that sounds interesting to me. Like, I would attend.
Yeah, me too.
I think that one way, like, I mean, I don't, obviously, like, I don't have enough information maybe, but I would say like if you're partnering with like local stores or like local designers, try to find people who are really willing to share it out with their audience as well. Because I know I've seen a lot, like one thing that I have seen a lot of is virtual markets, because I follow a lot of like local artists and like, you know, local potters and stuff on Instagram, and I've seen that a lot of them are doing virtual markets, and I know that that's been like pretty successful because people are like, oh yeah, like shopping online, supporting local. So just based on that, I'm like, oh, I think a fashion show would be successful if you're showing people like, yeah, like what the outfits are, like, yeah, I'm almost wondering, like, I think the one thing that I'm thinking is like, I feel like you'd have to have like a really good camera and like good lighting just to make sure that everything like looked as good as it would in person. But otherwise, yeah, like I don't see why not. I think that could be a really fun event. And also, I just want to say, like, the fact that we haven't heard about that happening as much, I think is also a good sign because it means that not as many people are doing it, so people might not be sick of it. So that's just my, you know, my thought on that.
Yeah, I agree. It sounds like a great idea. I would definitely attend to see how that worked and see what that was about. So that's yeah, audience member, we say that's a go, I think. And also send us a link so we can sign up and watch. Sounds very interesting. So we're getting very close to time. A lot of people have been asking us for a link to the virtual research report that you created. So we're going to put that in the chat box for everybody to see, so everyone can download and have a look at that. I was wondering, just to sort of wrap us up, Tatiana, if you had any final comments on the event report that you wanted to share with everybody.
Yeah, so I would say definitely check it out. We feel like there's like a lot of really useful advice in there. I would say that it contains a lot about the strategies organizations are using right now to fundraise, about their ticket prices, about how they're engaging members. I do want to say, like, one final thing, that it's really important to have some kind of interactive or engaging component. That if you take one thing away from that report and from this talk, I would say that that's like the most important thing, just because I feel like a lot of people, like if they're just attending an event and there's like no conversation or nothing like that, it's a lot more like boring. And also organizations who are not trying to engage their attendees are a lot less likely to be successful. So that is just something to keep in mind. Just always try to have some kind of engaging component and some kind of way that the audience can either interact with each other or with you.
And to the audience, if you would like sort of more information and more tips about how to keep people engaged, we have an expert webinar. I'm going to drop the link in the chat box now for you all to sign up, on designing and leading virtual meetings that keep people engaged. And that's Nancy Settle-Murphy will be hosting that for us on Tuesday the 15th at 2 p.m.
Cool.
Our next episode as well of Targeted Impact is in 2 weeks' time. We have an exciting one because we've got best-selling author Robbie Kelman-Baxter joining us. She's going to answer everybody's questions on why introducing a subscription model may be the way forward for your membership organization. And we'll also be giving away copies of her new book, The Forever Transaction. So be sure to sign up and check that out. And with that being said, Tatiana, thank you so much for joining us today. It was really great to get to talk to you and answer all of these questions. And thank you to the audience for always sending fantastic questions and giving us the ability to share our insights with you. Thank you, everyone. Bye.